Good afternoon and welcome to True Crime Mysteries. If you're new to the channel, hello and welcome, and if you're returning, welcome back. In the United States, there are over 164,000 miles of highway that stretch from coast to coast, and we know that highways are a popular way for predators to seek victims. We know that numerous serial killers have taken advantage of crossing state lines. Advances in crime scene investigation and technology, as well as the digital era making information between states more accessible and easier to access, have given us more insight into how these crimes are committed. And where there are highways, what we saw pop up along these stretches of road were some of the most dangerous places: motels, truck stops, gas stations, and small eateries. Today, we are going to discuss one particular serial killer who used motels along the I-65 to hunt women. A man who was known only as the I-65 Killer until recently, when he was recently identified through DNA records. Let's get into it. On February 21, 1987, a couple walked into a Super 8 motel in Elizabethtown, Kentucky at 6:30 a.m. to check out. They immediately noticed something amiss. The telephone had been ripped from the wall, there were desk items strewn about the small office, and there was no sign of any staff members. They returned to their room and called 911 at 6:38 a.m. An officer arrived and confirmed that the scene did look like something had happened. He described it as looking as if a brawl between a large group of people had occurred. The officer called for backup when he couldn't immediately find the missing staff person. More officers arrived and began searching the property. It wasn't long before they found 41-year-old Vicky Heath, who had been the only employee on the property for the overnight shift. She had been sexually assaulted and had been shot twice in the back of the head. It had appeared that Vicky fought to the very end. The struggle appeared to have started in the lobby and made its way all the way out to the back of the building, near the dumpsters, and had passed that. Her clothing had been ripped and the mud and grass around her body had been disturbed, with one set of muddy footprints that went from Vicky's body to the parking lot at the front of the building. Vicky was new to the job and new to Elizabethtown. The recently divorced woman had 2 adult children and she was starting over. A manager had left Vicky that night around 11 p.m. Though it had been a Saturday night, it was still the off-season and the motel still wasn't very busy. All had seemed normal. There were no guests that had seemed of any concern, nor had anything happened recently that drew any cause for concern for Vicky or anyone else. Despite what seemed to have been a huge commotion, none of the patrons that night heard anything. Officers also noted that an undisclosed sum of money had been stolen that night as well, and theorized that the crime had been a robbery gone wrong. It had been a shocking murder in the community. Officers never established any suspects, and the case quickly went cold. 2 years later, another similar murder occurred in Marydale, Indiana. Mary Margaret Gill, known to friends and family as Peggy, spent the evening with her father, as it was his birthday, on the evening of March 2, 1989, before heading out to work the night shift at the local Marydale Days Inn. Little did Peggy's father know that his birthday would be the worst day of his life the following day. Peggy arrived for her shift at the Days Inn at 11 p.m. A short time later, she spoke with Betty, the hotel's general manager, as she did every time before she started her shift. Hotel records showed that Peggy checked in a guest between the hours of 1:30 a.m. and 1:40 a.m. A witness told police that he attempted to check in the hotel at 2 a.m., but no clerk was found, so he left. This time frame leads police to believe that between 1:30 a.m. and 2 a.m. is when the crime occurred. 5 a.m. rolled around and Peggy was supposed to call the general manager, Betty, before leaving the hotel. This call had become routine because of the recent crimes at the local hotels. Minutes after not receiving the call from Peggy, Betty decided to try and make contact with Peggy and called the hotel. When Peggy did not immediately answer, she knew something was wrong and called the police. The Maryvale Police Department was dispatched immediately. The first officer arrived at the hotel around 6 a.m. Upon his arrival, several guests were waiting to check out, but no clerk was in sight, which was unusual. After finding Peggy's car keys and wallet behind the desk, the police decided to reach out to Peggy's family to see if she was with them or if they had heard from her. Her family informed the officer that she was not with them, nor had they heard from Peggy. Meanwhile, the general manager, Betty, arrived on the scene. She discovered the cash drawer appeared to have been pried open and that money was missing. The officers began to search for Peggy and made a gruesome discovery. Peggy's body was found in a hotel hallway in a vacant wing where all the rooms were empty. One of the unusual things that the police officers noticed was that Peggy's clothing had been removed and folded neatly and placed beside her naked body. It was determined that Peggy had been sexually assaulted and shot in the head with a .22 caliber firearm. She also had a fresh cut on her shoulder. It did not appear to be a violent struggle based on the evidence observed on Peggy's body. They theorized based on the evidence that the suspect robbed Peggy, directed her to the vacant hallway at gunpoint. He forced her to take her clothes, fold them, and lay them beside her on the ground. It was then that he attacked her and killed her. Family members and members of Peggy's social circle were questioned. It was then determined that Peggy did not know her assailant. In a shocking discovery, an hour later a similar crime occurred an hour away from Maryville in Remington, Indiana. The victim, Jean Marie Gilbert, was born and raised in Rensselaer, Indiana. She was a single mom, recently divorced, with 2 children, Kimberly and Scott. Jean and her children had moved in with her mother while Jean was attending school and working several jobs to provide a better life for her children. Jean worked at the Days Inn to supplement her income. The Days Inn was located in the small town of Remington, right outside Rensselaer, a small rural town very similar to Maryville, Indiana, where Peggy's murder had occurred. Jean was taking business classes to obtain a career where she could support her children. On March 2, 1989, Jean switched shifts with a coworker because she needed to attend her daughter's final cheerleading event the next day. The shift started at 11 p.m. It is important to note that the Remington Days Inn where Jean worked was only 50 miles away from the Maryville Days Inn where Peggy worked. Both hotels were in the middle of nowhere and both were in rural towns. Based on hotel records and witness accounts on Friday, March 3rd, Jean made a courtesy wake-up call to a guest at around 4:30 a.m. Then, around 6 a.m., the Jasper County Sheriff's Office began receiving calls from guests trying to check out but could not find the hotel clerk. Officers were dispatched to the scene where, upon arrival, they discovered that the hotel lobby door was locked. The police then reached out to the hotel's general manager and asked her to come down and give them access to the lobby. A hotel employee was also waiting to get in to start her shift. Officers eventually gained access to the Remington Days Inn and discovered that there had been a robbery. The cash drawer appeared to have been pried open and the money was missing. Not only that, but the hotel employee Jean was also missing. Like the Maryville, Indiana crime scene, officers find Jean's purse, keys, and school books at the desk. While all of this is happening, the Indiana State Police were contacted by a school bus driver in White County, which was not far from the Days Inn. The bus driver had spotted a nude body on the side of a county road. Indiana State Troopers and the White County Sheriff's Department were dispatched to the scene. There they found a body of a woman only wearing her shoes and socks. It appeared that she had been sexually assaulted and dumped on the roadside. Not long after the remains were found, they were able to quickly identify that the remains were that of Jean Marie Gilbert. Interestingly, her Days Inn uniform that she'd been wearing that evening was missing and had not been recovered at the crime scene or where her body was. The investigation would be conducted by the Indiana State Police, who found Jean's body, and the Jasper County Sheriff's Office, who were investigating the robbery at the Remington Days Inn. Police believe the suspect, after robbing their hotel, led Jean to the car at gunpoint, where he drove her to where her body was found. The exit off of Interstate 65, where Jean's body was found, was isolated with no gas stations, restaurants, or hotels, and completely deserted, and she was attacked and killed in that clearing near where her body was found. Jean's autopsy revealed that she had several scratches and scrapes on her body. Those wounds would indicate that she had been dragged from the vehicle. Jean was shot 3 times with the .22 caliber firearm, once in the back of the head, once in the shoulder blade, and once on the left side of her torso. A witness, a farmer who lived in the area, told police that he had heard gunshots around 5:30 a.m. This was around the same time that the bus driver stated they saw a tan-colored Toyota van with its lights on heading westbound on the same road where Jean's body was found. Police began to put two and two together and realized that the Maryville crime scene was extremely similar to the Remington crime scene. The only difference was that Jean was taken from the hotel where Peggy was killed on site. And just like in Vicky's case, there were no suspects, and eventually the case went cold.
It's been so long the building at 83rd in Louisiana isn't even a days in anymore. Maryville's assistant chief tells me he was just 12 when Peggy Gill was murdered at the hotel in March of 1989. But he says his department was always very aware of this case.
It was one of those cases that we didn't put it away. It remained open. We tried to work it anytime anybody got anything, they would follow up on it.
Gill's murder has long been connected to the 1987 murder of Vicky Heath, who was killed at a Super 8 motel in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. It was also connected to the murder of Jean Gilbert. She was murdered at a Days Inn in Remington, Indiana, also in 1989. Today, her daughter said she still remembers the last words her mother spoke to her.
I love you, I'll see you tomorrow. I didn't see her that tomorrow, but I see her every day.
9 months after these two crimes, a Columbus, Indiana woman who has not been identified was attacked. She was working at the Days Inn in Columbus when a man approached her and asked her where he could get coffee and food. The clerk made a few suggestions and the man proceeded to leave. He returned to the Days Inn with a cup of coffee in his hand. He then threw the coffee in the clerk's face and used a gun to rob her. After the attack at knife point, he led her outside. According to the victim, he told her to walk behind the hotel, and as she walked, she could hear the suspect's footsteps behind her. She then fell through a layer of ice in a ditch, which made a little bit of a commotion. She told law enforcement it was at that point the suspect panicked and left. She walked up the hill where she saw a trailer, and she called the police for help. Through DNA, it was determined that this victim was the only surviving victim. The DNA they collected from the scene and her description of the suspect helped police find the murderer 30 years later. Investigators had also collected ballistic evidence from the scenes, which connected the killers to the murders that occurred on I-65 in Indiana. It was announced in April of this year by the Indiana Police Department that they had found the I-65 killer, whose name was Harry Edward Greenwell. Police say Greenwell had a long and extensive criminal history. Investigators used a process known as investigative genealogy. This process allows investigators to upload crime scene DNA. They use genetic genealogy from databases like Ancestry.com and 23andMe to identify the suspect. From there, they discovered distant relatives, and they eventually were able to piece it to a 99.999 positive match.
We're here this morning to announce a recent development into the cold case investigation known in many circles as the I-65 Killer. This case began February 21st, 1987, with the murder of Vicky Heath, who was working the night shift at the Super 8 Hotel located in Elizabethtown, Kentucky. On March 3rd, 1989, the Indiana State Police investigated two homicides that occurred on the same day of similar circumstances. Margaret Gill, also known as Peggy Gill, was murdered while working the night shift at the Days Inn located in Maryville, Indiana. Jean Gilbert was murdered while working the night shift at the Days Inn located in Remington, Indiana. Numerous pieces of evidence were collected and preserved to include DNA, clothing, hairs, fibers, and ballistic evidence from these three cases. On January 2nd, 1990, a clerk working in the Days Inn located in Columbus, Indiana, was attacked in a similar manner as the previous three victims. This victim was able to escape her attacker and survived. She was ultimately able to give an excellent physical description of the suspect and details of the crime. Forensic evidence was also collected and preserved from this case. She is the only known victim to have survived the vicious and brutal attacks of this killer. One of the primary factors that linked these four crime scenes were their proximity to I-65, and for this obvious reason, the person was responsible for these murders was dubbed the I-65 Killer. As you can see from this slide above me, the evidentiary similarities and links are highlighted between the four cases. And we've also have this on this display next to us. The Indiana State Police Laboratory subsequently matched ballistic evidence linking the Gill and Gilbert murders. The Indiana State Police Laboratory also later matched DNA evidence linking the Heath and Gilbert murders to the Columbus, Indiana case. Indiana State Police detectives recently requested assistance from the FBI's Gang Response Investigative Team, also known as GRIT. Many investigative and scientific techniques have either improved or been created through new technology since the 1980s and 90s. One of these methods is investigative genealogy. Investigative genealogy is the use of DNA analysis in combination with traditional genealogy research and historical records to generate investigative leads for unsolved violent crime. This was an investigative step that generated a significant and important lead in this investigation. Further investigation and kinship lab testing by the Indiana State Police Lab of crime scene samples positively identified the suspect. The match was 99.9999% positive. It is this scientific breakthrough that ultimately led to the identification of the I-65 killer, Harry Edward Greenwell. Greenwell was born December 9, 1944 and died in January 2013. Greenwell had an extensive criminal history and had been in and out of prison several times, even escaping from jail on 2 separate occasions. He was known to travel frequently in the Midwest. We have put the original sketch along with photos of Greenwell and a mugshot of him into the media packet that you all have been given today. We are not displaying his photo up here today out of respect to the victims and their families and not to glamorize him any more than he already has been or may be in the future. Investigators documented significant events in Harry Greenwell's life to include law enforcement contacts in the following timeline, and that's displayed right here. These events were gathered by review of Greenwell's criminal history, historical police reports, historical Iowa Department of Corrections paperwork, which included some self-reporting by him, newspaper archives, public records, and the conducting of interviews by detectives. As most of you know, Interstate I-65 runs from Gary, Indiana, all the way down south to Mobile, Alabama. Investigators have long believed that there is a distinct possibility that there have been murders, rapes, robberies, or assaults that have not yet been connected to this investigation. Investigators are actively working with other departments in the Midwest to determine if Greenwell was a perpetrator of other violent crimes yet to be solved.
Unfortunately, the families will not be able to see Greenwell prosecuted because he died in 2013 from cancer. However, they can now find some peace in knowing that the man who committed these terrible murders has been identified and is no longer on this earth. The FBI and law enforcement is continuing to work to see if Greenwell had additional victims in surrounding communities.
I want to start off by saying to the families of Vicki Heath, Peggy Gill, and Jean Gilbert, we know that despite the years that have passed since these horrible events, that you have never forgotten the loss of your loved ones, and that this heinous crime is something that all of you have had to live with daily for all of these years. I know that this announcement can't take away the pain that you felt at this loss, but what we hope is that through today's information and revelation, this provides some answers that may aid you in your healing process that you go through every single day and bring you some sense of peace.
Well, that is it for this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. If you like the content and what I do over here, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss my next upload. If you could give a like if you enjoyed the content, that would be much appreciated as it helps the channel to grow. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for being here. I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.